Hello and welcome to today's video. Today I want to talk to you about the main differences between histamine intolerance and mast cell activation syndrome. Now, the reason this is important is, first of all, it can help you figure out which you have. If you have more of a histamine intolerance presentation or you have more of a mast cell activation syndrome presentation. And there are some labs that you can do, but to be honest, I think it's easier to figure them out if you have this kind of understanding. So not only is this going to help you understand what you've got going on, but my philosophy is that we need to more clearly define a problem if we want to be able to solve it, if we want to be able to find the solution. So if we can't really understand the problem, you're never going to find the solution because you don't really know what you're looking at. So this is really important because if it helps us to understand what it is and we can define it more clearly, then we can talk more about solutions. Because I've had histamine intolerance and mast cell activation syndrome. I actually had both. And these are debilitating conditions. These affect your ability to function as a normal person on a daily basis. They affect what you can eat. They have an impact on your ability to think clearly, to sleep, to rest. They have a huge influence on your immune system. And obviously, they have a big impact on your diet as well. So this is going to impact your social life. This is going to impact how easy your life can be. It's so easy now being able to go out and eat with some friends, to be able to go for, we have a pizza day kind of scheduled in a couple of weeks with an expat group in our local area. So I can go and have a pizza. How cool is that? You know, I can have the cheese, the gluten, I can have some fermented meats on top. And for me, all of this was impossible just a few years ago. And I'm not saying this to brag. Maybe I'm saying a little bit to brag because I really want you to know that this is a solvable problem. It's so often posted online and I see on Reddit and in different Facebook groups where people just completely lose hope and they give up and they think that they're going to have to live with this forever. And you don't. And I'm not the only person that's seen this. I've worked with hundreds of people that have achieved this same outcome. So I'm saying this because I really want you to stay hopeful and optimistic and to be solutions orientated. Because if you let that feeling of overwhelm or that feeling that you can't solve this, you stop looking for the solution and then you can't find the solution if you're not looking for it, right? So what are the main differences here? Histamine intolerance, mast cell activation syndrome. They're very connected. Almost all of the symptoms cross over. This is because whether we're looking at true histamine intolerance or mast cell activation syndrome, the molecule at play here is histamine. And what the symptoms are going to look like are different in every single person. Some people get the more classic response, which is like some itchiness, especially on the skin, around the face, around the eyes. Some people get some kind of like allergy-like symptoms. So they could get mucus, they could get congested. For some people, they will get insomnia. For some people, they will get skin rashes. Some people get hives. Everybody gets a different reaction. And this can be why something like histamine intolerance or mast cell activation syndrome can be so hard to pin down, because what you're really looking for with an official diagnosis is that you fit a certain criteria, like you tick certain boxes. But everybody can have a different presentation, so it sometimes can be hard to fit into those boxes. And because the molecule that's causing all of these symptoms is the same molecule, it's histamine, it can be difficult to distinguish between whether this is a true histamine intolerance situation or if this is a mast cell activation syndrome presentation. So whatever the symptoms are that you have, know that they don't have to be the same as somebody else. And just because somebody else has 1, 2, 3 symptoms and that's histamine intolerance and you don't have those symptoms, therefore yours isn't histamine intolerance, that's not necessarily true. So for you, whether it's some itching or skin problems, whether it's insomnia, whether it's affecting your mental health, for me, there was a lot of suicidal depression and a lot of anxiety and panic. This was one way that I experienced this felt sense of like a lot of histamine inside of my system. I also had a lot of this itching in the eyes. For me, it would feel like I had something in my eye. Like imagine that feeling when you have an eyelash in your eye, but there's nothing there. Imagine that. So it would constantly feel like I had stuff in my eyes and there was nothing there. It was literally just this histamine causing an irritation in the mucosa. And it was so distressing. My eyes would constantly like leak and I would have this big headache and I would be itchy like here and all over here and it would be all itchy and I'd get these random kind of like points that would almost like itch. It's almost kind of like a weird kind of itch, like a bit like a bug crawling under your skin or like a bit of a tingle. And I'd get a little bit here and then I'd get a little bit over here. And it was like all over, you know, all of this with suicidal depression, anxiety. My gut was churning and didn't feel good. It was really awful. So this is why I really want to help you solve this, because I know how bad this can feel in your body. So how do we make this distinction between histamine intolerance and mast cell activation syndrome? And for me, the key distinction is, where is the histamine coming from? So in the classic, like true histamine intolerance, we have too much histamine either coming from the food in the diet, or histamine is being produced in our gut by a gut dysbiosis or some kind of digestive dysfunction. And all of this histamine, so this is what I would consider exogenous histamine. So this is histamine that's coming from outside of our body. Even though it might be being produced inside the gut, this is technically still outside of the body, because our gut has this one cell thick lining that creates this kind of like hollow tube. So from your mouth all the way to your anus, to your rectum, it's like a hollow tube that's inside of your body, but it's outside of your body. So technically, this is outside of your body. And obviously food that you eat, like maybe like tomatoes or fermented meat or fermented dairy or whatever it might be, these are all exogenous sources of histamine. So histamine intolerance, from my definition, is where these exogenous sources of histamine, be it from the diet or from the gut flora, is more than our body has the ability to break down. And the way that we break this histamine down from these sources is either from DAO, so this is an enzyme that we produce in our gut lining, or it's from beneficial microbes. So we have beneficial bacteria in our gut that can actually be histamine degraders. So they break this histamine down for us. So this is what I would define as being like true histamine intolerance. So the histamine that we're reacting to is exogenous. It's histamine that's coming from outside of our body. Whereas MCAS, mast cell activation syndrome, what's happening in this case is there is something that is pissing off the immune system. There's some kind of irritant. This could be trauma and emotions and stress. This can be physical compounds like toxins. These could be toxins that are produced inside of our gut, but those toxins are then leaking in and they're irritating a part of our immune system called mast cells. And as a response, those mast cells, they get all shaken up and they get disturbed and they release histamine. But this is an endogenous production of histamine. So this histamine is actually coming from inside of our body. It's not outside histamine coming in, it's inside histamine being shaken up and released. That's the key distinction. Histamine intolerance, true histamine intolerance, is exogenous histamine, whether it's from the diet or from the gut. And MCAS, mast cell activation syndrome, is endogenous production. So this is where our body, our mast cells are one major part of this, but there are other places that can produce histamine as well. But overall, the histamine that's being produced inside of our body is overwhelming our ability to clear that histamine. These are the two main distinctions. And once you define this situation this way, it's very interesting because we can run a couple of tests. So we can do some experiments to see where is the histamine coming from. So for one example, this could look like if you're somebody that responds really well to taking a DAO supplement, that's a really good indicator that it's probably more of a histamine intolerance problem. And if you are somebody that responds really well to a low histamine diet, that could also be an indicator that it's more of a histamine intolerance problem. Whereas, for example, let's say you go low histamine, maybe you see some improvement, but you're still experiencing a lot of histamine intolerance symptoms. So maybe the intensity's gone from like a 10 to like a 4 or a 5. That could be an indicator that there is still some coming from the gut. So maybe you're not digesting your food correctly, and there's some dysbiosis producing histamine as a consequence of that poor digestion. That would still be a clue that there's some histamine intolerance component there. But it could also imply that there is something that's irritating the immune system, and that's where that histamine reaction is coming from. Another thing that we could do as a test would be maybe take like a digestive enzyme, for example, or some type of digestive support, maybe betaine HCl, whatever it is. I'm just giving you like a theoretical example here. So we improve the function of the digestive system, so the food is being broken down better. What happens to your histamine symptoms? If they then significantly improve, then that shows us that it shows us that this is really like a functional problem where you're not digesting your food correctly. And then this undigested food is either feeding dysbiotic microbes that are then going to eat those foods and produce histamine, which you then absorb and have a problem with, or those food compounds that don't fully break down properly, they get kind of half digested and then they're absorbing through a leaky gut. And the immune system is seeing those things and is attacking them. And then we're having more of a mast cell reaction to it. So you can see looking at it through this lens is interesting because it helps us start to understand where the dysfunction is. Another test on the other side of things, for example, could be you could potentially try something like a mast cell stabilizer. So one of the most common mast cell stabilizers that I've seen people use is something called ketotifen. So if, for example, you were to take this ketotifen and then you see that you have a significantly increased tolerance to foods even foods that are high in histamine, this would be a really good indicator that this is way more of a mast cell activation syndrome problem than truly a histamine intolerance problem. So I know that might feel like a lot to digest, but all I really want you to take away from this is just to understand that these two problems are different. And once we can more clearly define what they are and how they cause the symptoms that they do in the body, we can run different types of experiments. And I've just given you a few here, but there are like 5 or 10 more different experiments that we could have run of like different supplements that we can try or different changes and modifications that we can make. And this can help us more clearly define why do you have the symptoms that you have. Because if we can understand why you have those symptoms, we've kind of almost accidentally already figured out the solution. This is the hard part. Figuring out why you have the symptoms, that's the difficult part. Once we know why you have the symptoms, we just fix it. It's literally just like a problem that we become aware of, and then we solve the problem. So what do you think about doing that now? Let's actually solve this as though this is actually a solvable problem. So let's say we're able to deduce that this is more of a true histamine intolerance problem. So there's too much histamine coming from the diet or from the gut bacteria producing histamine, and it's overwhelming the body's ability to break that histamine down. Well, first of all, I would say histamine has been in the diet for thousands of years, and we should be able to process it. So the problem isn't that there's too much histamine in the diet. The problem is that your ability to degrade that histamine has been reduced. So we want to try to figure out, how do we improve that degradation of that histamine, and how can we reduce the histamine load, but not by reducing the amount that's coming from the diet, but by reducing the amount that's coming from the gut bacteria. Because all of humanity has consumed fermented foods and aged meat, and like refrigeration is very new. There used to be histamine in everything that we used to eat. Like go back 100, 150 years ago, everything is like a fermented food. Everything is high in histamine. So it can't be the food. It has to be something inside of us. So if it is a gut bacteria problem, we need to try to shift that microbiome. One of my favorite ways to do this is to start with a probiotic. I think probiotics are amazing. Obviously, fermented foods definitely have their place, but if you have histamine intolerance, you probably can't handle fermented foods. So you're not going to be able to make much progress with that. So I really like to start with the delactate-free probiotic from Custom Probiotics, because not only is it delactate-free, it's also histamine-free. So not only do these strains not contain any histamine and not produce histamine, they actually break it down. They are histamine degrading microbes. So this is going to be a really fundamental shift in the microbiome. As we put these bugs in, we're going to move some of those histamine producers out. We're going to get rid of those because these guys are going to start to crowd it out, and we re-inoculate, we re-establish a healthy microbiome where we have more of these histamine degraders. I kid you not, this is like a genuine, like hand on my heart, I can tell you this sincerely. I have had so many comments, so many emails where people say, I took the delactate-free probiotic. That's the only thing I did. Like, I only watched one of your videos and I did this one thing. They reach out to me 2, 3, 6 months later and they say, I don't have histamine intolerance anymore. So when someone has this situation going on where the histamine intolerance is purely caused by a gut dysbiosis, so they're missing the beneficial microbes that degrade the histamine and they have too many of the histamine producers, this probiotic alone fixes the problem. This isn't everyone though. This is maybe 20 to 30% of people that have histamine intolerance. And if you think you might be one of these people, and you haven't tried low histamine probiotics yet, you are absolutely crazy. You have to give it a shot because it is an absolute game changer for the people that it really works for. Even if it doesn't prove to be a game changer for you, it's still a really important part of the solution, whether it's any of these other issues. If it's a digestive dysfunction, if it's truly MCAS or mast cell activation syndrome, working on probiotics is really important anyway. So even if you don't see a big improvement just from using the probiotics alone, just know that you're still building a solid foundation for holistic healing, and we can add some more steps later on. This intervention will address the excess histamine that is coming from histamine that's being produced by dysbiotic microbes and a lack of histamine degradation that we've lost because we've lost these beneficial microbes. So this is one of the first points that we want to look at in terms of histamine intolerance. The next is how well you're breaking down, digesting, and absorbing your food. One of the most common problems is we're just simply not breaking the food down correctly. And this creates an environment that allows dysbiotic microbes to thrive. They will eat the foods that you can't digest and they'll produce histamine as a byproduct. This also damages the gut lining, which reduces our ability to produce DAO naturally, which is obviously going to decrease your tolerance to histamine. So working with digestive supports, depending on what you are dealing with, is a really high level intervention. I actually built a quiz. It's completely free. We call it the Gut Health Quiz. I designed it in a way where you can basically fill out 90 yes or no questions. These are so simple questions. It's like, do you experience constipation? Have you experienced reflux? Do you get bloated when you eat certain foods? It's like childish level questions. These are super easy. You just answer yes, no, or maybe / I don't know. You literally just answer 90 questions like this. And my philosophy, I believe that your body tells us what's wrong with the symptoms that you have. So everyone has different symptoms because everyone has something that's slightly differently wrong. So by filling out the quiz, this gives us enough information to know what is wrong in your body. And once the quiz has all of these answers from you, it creates a personalized report that it gives to you, which tells you which types of digestive supports you might benefit from, in which areas of gut function you might be struggling. So it breaks it down into the 5 pillars format, which is the stomach acid, digestive enzymes, bile, motility, and mucosa. And I designed this quiz not to be specifically for people that have histamine intolerance. So if you fill out this quiz and it says you should have bone broth or you should have apple cider vinegar, obviously don't do that, because this is just designed for people that have general gut or digestive problems. So don't do the suggestions that don't make sense for you. But the way that I want you to try to use this tool is to figure out where are you having digestive dysfunctions, and then it will give you some suggestions that you might be able to use that will help you to address those digestive dysfunctions. And if the reason that you have histamine intolerance is because of digestive dysfunction, if you fix the digestive dysfunction, you don't have histamine intolerance anymore. So you can go and eat all of those different foods again and you won't have a problem. Now, that really covers it for like true histamine intolerance. And there are some things that you can do in the short term that might help. Like you could try some of the things that might help with healing a leaky gut. So like the L-glutamine, the colostrum, the kepos, or the human milk oligosaccharides. There's a lot of different things that you could do that could try to help heal that gut lining. You could also try things like DAO. These are all like kind of short-term things though. They're not really fixing the actual problem. So if you want to do those things and they help, then do it. But really, we want to fix the underlying issue. So that really covers us in terms of histamine intolerance. Now we need to look at MCAS, because this one's a little bit more complex. The common thing I see with people that are dealing with mast cell activation syndrome, every single person that I've ever talked to that has MCAS, mast cell activation syndrome, any kind of issue in this region, there's always something that is irritating the immune system. Always. What that is different for different people, but the common denominator, the thing that is the common theme between every single individual that has MCAS, is that something is irritating the immune system. I will give you a couple of ideas. These are the most common that I've seen in my experience, but there are obviously more than just this list. The most common that I've seen is some sort of environmental toxin. So this could be mold in the environment, for example. If you live in a water damaged building or if you had mold exposure in the past, this is a hugely irritating immune substance, and developing mast cell activation syndrome is an adaptive response to try to help your body to deal with this toxicity. We could also look at other types of environmental toxicity that you might not think of, and these are some really interesting ones. So this could be something like a dental issue. So if you have some kind of like dental infection, or if you have like amalgam fillings, this is constantly trickling toxicity into your body. The way to think about MCAS usually is that there is a low level poison that is just trickling into the body over an extended period of time. This is the most common. So some kind of thing in the environment. This could be pesticides if you live in an agricultural area. I had one client that had some of these sort of issues, and they were actually a chemical engineer. So they were exposed to lots of different vapors and fumes and chemicals, and they never realized this could affect them. I've had other clients that are like hairdressers, for example, and they're using like hairspray, and they're doing like hair dye, and yeah, they wear the gloves, but sometimes it splashes or you get a little bit on your wrist. And over time, they're constantly just exposing themselves to this low level toxicity. This could be true as well if you're a cleaner, for example. If you're constantly exposed to bleach or to different types of chemicals that are evaporating in the environment, your body is constantly trickling toxicity into it. And if the main detoxification pathways are overloaded, the immune system will kick in as an adaptive response to try to protect itself, and you will develop mast cell activation syndrome. So my first suggestion, if you have MCAS, is always try to find the thing that's irritating the immune system. And the most common thing, I'd say this is true for like 70-80% of people, is there's some sort of environmental toxicity, be that mold toxicity, some kind of chemical exposure from work or from environment, a dental issue, a cavitation or a dental infection, or amalgam fillings. I've even had some people that develop these issues from like breast implants. This is a type of chemical toxicity. So there's a lot of different things that it can be. But you basically have to put this laser focus on like what is irritating my immune system, because it's something. Your immune system doesn't just go dysfunctional for no reason. Something is irritating it. So we want to try and figure out what it is. Another one that can be very common is a gut dysbiosis. So this kind of ties into the point that we were making with the original histamine intolerance and digestive dysfunctions area. And this is why I was saying working on these things is really helpful, even if it doesn't actually fix the problem. And this can be because the thing that can be constantly irritating the immune system could be undigested food. So if you've taken like PPIs for an extended period of time, or if you've taken any kind of medication for the digestion. For example, I was having some digestive issues. I took a Buscopan. So this is an antispasmodic drug. I had some like twitches, I could feel my intestine like twitching. I would take this medication, but this destroys the enteric nervous system. So it basically destroys the nerves in your gut. So you lose nerve signaling. So you lose motility, you lose signaling for stomach acid and digestive enzymes. And you can imagine that's only going to lead to one place, right? You're not going to digest your food properly, and then you're going to develop problems when you don't break your food down properly. So for me, this was one of my environmental toxicity components, was a medication that I took. But the reason that this really hurt my body wasn't because of the toxicity of the compound. It was more about how it negatively influenced my digestive function. So if you've done anything that's impacted your digestive function, and this can be from a medication, but this can be from something completely different. This could even be from stress. If you work a high stress job, you will send less energy to your digestive system. You will break the food down less. So the real reason this is so important, breaking the food down properly, is if you don't break it down properly, you don't fully get it down to its tiny, tiny little ingredient pieces that it should do. We have these bigger fragments of proteins or of amino acids, or these unfully digested compounds that then leak through the leaky gut into the body, and they trigger an immune reaction. And the mast cells will be a part of this immune reaction, and they will release histamine. Very interesting though, this can also happen due to bacterial or microbial fragments from our gut bacteria. So if you're somebody who has muscle activation syndrome and you react to certain foods, it's more likely that it's a digestive dysfunction because you don't break down certain foods appropriately. Those things leak in and then they trigger a reaction. And sometimes they trigger mast cell reactions, but they can cause all other types of reactions as well. They can cause skin problems, they can cause autoimmune issues like arthritis, they can cause depression, they can cause lots of different things. We're primarily looking at MCAS here because this is very common, and usually you'll have MCAS plus skin problem, plus chronic fatigue syndrome, plus autoimmunity. So if avoiding those foods reduces the MCAS symptoms, then it's more likely a digestive or sensitivity to that specific thing. Whereas if you react to everything, then it's much less likely to be the food and more likely to be your gut bacteria. So it could be that you are producing a certain microbe is producing a type of compound. This could be like a lipopolysaccharide or endotoxin, or it could be anything, honestly. There's something in your gut that's eating the food that you eat. So anytime you eat, it's eating it. And obviously these bugs will have a preference for certain foods. This is one reason why often you'll see people that have these kinds of issues, they go carnivore. This is because it's just avoiding all of the foods that feed those dysbiotic gut bacteria, because meat doesn't really provide the microbiome with much at all. So this just helps to control the symptoms, but it's not solving the problem really. But these gut bacteria, they proliferate when we are eating these foods, and they're producing these compounds that then are leaking into the body. And this is what's triggering the reaction. The mast cells are then reacting not to the fragments of the food, but to the fragments of the gut bacteria that are leaking in instead. And this is why you react to everything, not just specific types of foods. So if this is the case, we have to fix the microbiome. The microbiome for you is like a source of environmental toxicity that you bring with you everywhere you go. So you leave the moldy building, you quit the job as a cleaner or as the dentist that's exposed to mercury, or you leave wherever you're getting those other environmental toxicities. You go to the other side of the world, you still have MCAS. It's because the dysbiosis is the source of toxicity that's giving you the MCAS, and it's inside your gut, and you bring it with you everywhere you go. So it doesn't matter where you go, you're bringing it with you. So we have to, in this case, work more directly on the gut. We have to support the digestion. We have to correct the gut dysbiosis. That's the only way you're going to get a solution there. And finally, this is the one that really, really blows my mind, is your mast cells can literally become reactive just due to stress. So if you are chronically feeling unsafe, if you are chronically lonely, if you feel chronically unloved, if you feel chronically unsupported, if you are stressing all the time about money, about how you're going to pay the rent, about how you're going to keep a roof over your head, about this thing or that thing. You can even be like a very high level performer. It doesn't mean you're not worrying, you're just worrying about different problems. But if you're constantly stressed and worrying all the time, you are just signaling through your nervous system to your mast cells, danger, danger, something's wrong, something could go wrong. And they're just going to react to everything. The amount of people that I've seen that have not just mast cell problems, but like chronic health problems in general, that are able to just like stop work for a month or so, or just like go on holiday and just take a break from it, and their symptoms just magically improve. If that's you, there's a stress component to this. And I don't know why there's like a negative connotation. Like this is like, it's not like a real problem if it's coming from stress. It is. It's just as valid as if it's a chemical or a physiological issue. It's just as valid. And who really cares where it's coming from? All we need to do is define where it's coming from. Then we know what's wrong. Then we can fix it. Then you don't have to have your symptoms anymore. That's the end goal. So if there is a stress component, don't see that as a bad thing or make it mean that you are like less strong or not as useful as a regular, normal person. That's a completely unhelpful way of thinking about it. All we want to do is define the cause, and then that naturally provides us with a solution. So I hope I haven't overloaded you too much. And I also hope that I have overloaded you a little bit with some hope and some inspiration, because it's really important that you understand that this is a solvable problem. If you want me to take a look at your personal situation and help you navigate this, I would really be delighted to. This is literally my life's work now. If you would be interested to learn a little bit more about working with me or inquire about having a consultation, shoot me an email. My email address is support@williamdickinson.co.uk. We're super friendly. There's no commitment. You can even send an inquiry and then I never hear from you ever again. But if you're interested, just let us know and we would really love it. We would really be happy to help you. But more than anything, I just want you to leave this video today knowing that I have healed this. I have seen hundreds of other people heal it. Even if we don't do it together, just know that there is a solution out there. This is a functional issue. This is essentially a gut or digestive dysfunction or an immune system dysfunction. These are correctable problems. So don't let people tell you that it's not, because if you believe them, then you'll get that outcome. If you need any help, shoot me an email. And if you have any questions, leave me a little comment below. I hope you found it really interesting and helpful. You take care, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.